so we booked him for the tournament. But as I've told everybody when we've talked about this, you're going to hear names that you recognize instantly, and you'll hear names that you've never heard. But that's part of this too, because the guys you've never heard of are technically sound as the ones you have. You know, it's just that, and that's what part of this is about, is giving those guys, a platform in which to show their wares and then hopefully get them more exposure at a national level, because there'll be DVDs out for this as well. To give you, you got it there, but the first round is Jeff McAllister versus Big Boy. Now, some Canadian independent fans probably won't know a lot of these names. Drew Gulak from Philadelphia, who's in the CZW, who's been champion there as their cruiserweight champion. We're going against Bobby Sharp, who's the CNWA Canadian National Champion, or was when we signed him anyway.
Right.
Pepper Parks against Wardell Walkers. Sammy Callahan against Jamin Olivencia. Steve Anthony against Caprice Coleman. Adam Cole against Tony Nese. Colt Cabana against Kyle Matthews. Davey Richards against Kyle O'Reilly, and that's bracket A.
Right.
And of course, we're not an independent promotion as such. We're not in competition with anybody. Each one of these guys represents his home promotion, whatever that happens to be.
Right.
And it will be, announced as such. In other words, Drew Gulak represents, CZW, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Bobby Sharp represents CNWA, Western Canada, whatever. So it's, and then I think it's going to be, it's a little different, but we want to give people a legitimate alternative. In other words, Impact was supposed to be an alternative to WWE. Well, it's just WWE Light.
Yeah.
And, and this is not about how many times you can dive through the ropes or either. It's about wrestling. It's about switches, takedowns, telling a story, as we mentioned at the top of this interview. And obviously, if someone is cut or injured, the match will stop right away.
Okay.
I don't know if you had a chance to see Nigel's documentary.
No, I haven't yet.
Have you seen The Last of McGuinness?
Not yet, but I plan to. Trust me. Like, I just have to. Like, there's not enough hours in the day. I mean, as well as that as well as anybody. And yeah, but I definitely plan. I actually I just got in the mail the documentary on the Dynamite Kid, so I got to sit down and watch that as well.
Oh yeah, I've never seen it. Is it good?
I haven't watched it yet, but I'm sure.
Oh, you haven't had a chance to watch it?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sure it's going to be fantastic.
The Last of McGuinness, I was amazed because Nigel edited this thing himself, and it was his first attempt at that. He did a great job. But anyway, part of this is about blood, and he lost his spot with a TNA due to hepatitis. He has been clear. He no longer has it. But one of the things is, and he's right. I mean, back when it was the days of Kayfabe, one of the first. Well, I shouldn't say one of the first things, but early in my career, I was taught how to make a blade, how to use it, where you hide it, and it was part of the craft. It was part of your art, being able to gig yourself without the fans, seeing you do it, and because you were trying, blood obviously convinces people that something is real, although, I never saw a blood capsule in my life, although I know people say, well, you use a blood capsule and all that sort of thing. But anyway, but of course now it's not, with hepatitis and being such a, I had hepatitis in 1972, but it wasn't A, B, C, D. It was nothing like that. I was out of the ring for a little over 6 weeks. The guys that had worked with me, a few matches before actually I went to the doctor and was diagnosed, they were tested. Nobody had anything. And when I came back to work, there was never a question of whether I could come back to work, whether I'd get to do a blade job, if I needed to. The only thing I was told is you obviously can't donate blood any longer.
Right.
But think that with AIDS and that sort of thing now, it's a dangerous pursuit. Let's face it. And so Nigel is basically that's one of the things that he's. I won't say a crusade, but when he does his tours and his seminars, he's going back to Europe in May, I believe, to do a tour with the the documentary because part of it was was filmed in England and Ireland and so forth.
Right.
So anyway, so we're being very conscious of staying away from that and keeping everybody healthy and good. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great show. It's a new concept. Of course, we're hoping to develop it into something that will be prestigious and something that will be an annual affair.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm you mentioned it's going to be on DVD, so I'm definitely gonna check it out. I mean, it sounds like a really great concept, and like you said, time limits and other sports are important. So I mean, we should, bringing back time limits in pro wrestling matches, I think I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're hoping to create a true alternative, if we can, and also want it to be entertaining as well. But as we get cutting some interviews and stuff for it, we're telling them we don't want anybody to go on a pro wrestling rant or we want guys to talk like they would talk if they were in a legitimate competition, because still, if you're smart or not smart to the business today, my job, or if I were wrestling, is to still suspend your disbelief. When I hear some of these young independents go, well, everybody's smart. Well, as dumb as I may or may not be, I always knew movies were a work too. But if a movie was well done, it will draw you in, and at some point forget that it's, if the actor plays his part well, if the story's written well, you get caught up in it, And the bad, you want to kick the bad guy in the rear end, and you want the good guy to win whatever it is they're about. So our job is still to do that. I think people come to the matches to forget their own, my boss is a pain in the ass, or, I've got bills that I can't pay, or mom's sick, or whatever. So it's like you go to a movie to get lost in the movie. You go to a baseball game or a hockey game to do the same. Professional wrestling shouldn't be any different, and our job is to take you out of, the present and suspend disbelief. And, but I think so many young guys, again, think, well, this is, everybody's smart, so, but I think that's one of the things, too, that differs now than from years ago. I never acted mad. I was mad.
Right.
I mean, not legitimately, but you get my point, right?
Yeah.
And I think now, too often, the guys just come across as though they are putting it on. And I think that's part of the difference. And again, having a knowledgeable trainer who has been to the dance, I think is more important than, just doing it to be doing it. But, we're excited about the tournament, and I hope it continues on even when I'm gone. I enjoyed your part of the country. I thought it was beautiful in the Maritimes. I was up there in 1970 and lived up in Moncton. And I'll tell you what I enjoyed was Peggy's Cove.
Yes, yeah.
My family, I rented a cabin. I was there from, I think it was mid-April to mid-October. That was for the Cormiers, for Rudy K. And in fact, I just talked to Bobby, not Bobby, but Leo Burke, who was, well, all those guys were great workers. Rudy was my tag team partner for a while in the Carolinas, but the Beast and Bobby and Leo, every one of those guys were tremendous workers. But I remember I rented a cabin out in Shadiac Beach for a couple of weeks and had my mom and dad and my wife and the kids come up. And we came into Halifax for the match, just taking them around with me, the loop kind of one week, and went out to Peggy's Cove, and that's just amazing. And the Citadel, too, to think that was built back when there were no trucks and, derricks to lift all that granite, and it's just, but yeah, I enjoyed my time up there tremendously. A lot of, had a lot of good times. That was actually where I did my first television ever.
Really?
He gave me my shot, and that's how I got involved in doing play-by-play in color.
Excellent. Yeah, I know you mentioned Leo Burke, and I've seen Leo. He was here in Halifax last year for one of the local promotions. I was for his 65th birthday, and he looked great. He, if anybody ever messed with him, I'm sure he'd be able to kick their asses, I think.
I'll tell you who was strong was Beast, Ivan. Cormier was tremendously strong, but he was a hell of a worker too. Yeah, it was just a lot of fun. I tell you what, you folks in that part of the country love to fight too. I remember
oh yeah.
when I came in. Well, back in 1970, it was kind of, if you were an American and under the age of 40, they were calling you draft. I mean, I wasn't a draft dodger, but anyway, But when I came up, the idea, I never worked heel in my life, and that's the only place I ever worked heel. And Rudy said, I'm going to bring you in as a heel, and then we'll switch you at some point. I said, okay. And Eric Pomeroy, who wrestled as Stan Vachon down here in the States, Freddie Sweet Tan, what else? I'm trying to think of the other, Buck Robley, who is crazy, man. He's an American. The other two guys are Canadians working. I think, I know Freddie died in a house fire, and Eric just died. I think it's been a year or so ago. Buck is still around, I think, living down in Louisiana somewhere. But anyway, I traveled with those guys, and after fighting our way out of a couple bars and they had a riot in St. John where the cops had to come. And, well, I'll tell you, St. John was so bad on the heels is we'd pull our car up to the back door of the building, and there were two policemen there, one with a police car. And they would take the heels' keys and drive the cars and hide them somewhere so the fans couldn't, slice the tires and break the windows.
Wow.
And then, then they would go pick your car up, after the matches and bring it back to the arena.
Jeez.
But I remember one night a fan tried to jump Freddie Sweet Tan, and Freddie laid him out. And the guy was unconscious for like 10 minutes. It got kind of scary, honestly. But anyway, the fans wouldn't leave the building, and the cops had to come, and to get out of there one thing or another. But I said to Rudy, I said, okay, I've had my heel experience. Now, when the hell are we going to switch me back babyface while I'm still alive? Part of it was I had just bought a brand new Pontiac Bonneville down here, and the first miles I put on it was driving me up to the Maritimes. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not really interested in getting this car tore up while I'm here either. So
yeah, I mean.
So anyway, we and they finally switched me back babyface, and then the TV thing was, it was kind of ironic because I'd always been fascinated by disc jockeys, like the old rock and roll disc jockeys from the 50s and 60s, and it was always, kind of a suppressed desire, I guess, or something. And Rudy and I talked about, I had first met Gordon Soley in Tampa when I was Rookie of the Year for the NWA, and he was such a different announcer for wrestling at the time that it's something that fascinated me, because back then in the 60s, Richard, a lot of times your announcer were just the local news guy or the kiddie show host or something, and so they really weren't wrestling people, and a lot of times they would just take it lightly themselves, right?
Right.
But Soley, sold it for like he was a sports announcer with baseball, football, basketball, or anything else, and which so fascinated me. And then Gordon and I both were involved. We're big race fans. I had done drag racing, and he was part owner of Golden Gate Speedway, an oval stock car track in Clearwater, Florida. Anyway, so I just it just fascinated me, and I thought, well, I'd like to do that at some point in time. And Rudy was my next door neighbor in Charlotte. He and his family lived next door, and we traveled a lot together. When you're on the road, obviously you're killing time talking about anything just to while away the time. And so anyway, we worked Halifax on Tuesday, and did TV in Halifax on Wednesday morning. We wrestled in Moncton on Monday. And so Monday, before the Moncton matches, Rudy called my apartment and just started small, like, hey, how's things going, and this and that. And he said, you remember when we were on the road down in Charlotte, you were talking about how you might like to be an announcer sometime. I said, yeah, I remember that. He said, well, when we go to Halifax tomorrow, bring a sport coat and tie. I said, why? He said, because you're going to get your wish. I said, huh? Because the Cormiers were tremendous ribbers, right?
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, Rudy's ribbing me. No, he said, and I forget who it was, but anyway, the guy who was doing the play-by-play for us there at the time, had a death in his family, I think in Toronto, and had to leave,
Okay.
because of a family thing he had to take care of. So he said, I've got nobody else, you're going to have to do it. I had never, other than being interviewed, Richard, I never looked at a TV format. I had never done a TV show in my life, but it was something I just thought about. So talk about being nervous. I was nervous, man. So I went in on Wednesday morning, and there were weren't teams at that time. There was one guy on the desk. So cold, I'd never done it. I sat down at that desk. They had to open the show, interview wrestlers, cue out of segments, and I think I was so nervous that I did the right thing. But anyway, so finally Rudy came to me and said, well, you're doing a heck of a job for us. Good. In fact, if you will continue to do it, I'll, add extra to, back then we didn't have contracts. You either guaranteed so much a week or so a night or something like that.
Right.
But he said, I'll pay you over in wrestling to do the television to finish out the season. And he said, I'm going to leave whoever it was, I forget, at home. And he said, we're doing fine. I said, okay, if that's what you want to do. So that's how I got started in television, was through Rudy having the faith in me to allow me to do it. And so I finished up the season, and he actually wanted me to come back the next year and take over to be part of the office. And I had to publish magazines for Crockett and so forth and so on. He wanted me to come back and handle that and do the television, help produce television, everything, and not wrestle. Well, I'd been wrestling 10 years at the time. And, as much as I enjoyed that part of the country, and Rudy was a very close friend and enjoyed the whole family and the whole atmosphere, it's just I wanted to continue to wrestle,
Right.
If I could have done, if he just said, wait, come back next season and do the TV and continue to wrestle, I'd probably come back. But so anyway, I went to the States at the end of the season, and but that's how I got my start in TV. And then I just forgot about it. And then I had gone back to the Nashville territory, then went to Tampa territory, and then in 1970, in spring of '71, came into Charlotte again. And I was in the office, and Lord Littlebrook, the midget wrestler,
yes,
who had been up in the Maritimes at the time, he was in talking to Mr. Crockett. And I came in, and we were talking, and Brooks said, Mr. Crockett, he said, why don't you have Les on your television? And Jim looked at him funny. He said, well, he is on my TV. He said, no, I mean it as an announcer. And Jim said, what are you talking about? He said, well, he did Rudy's TV last year up in the Maritimes, and he does a heck of a job. And Mr. Crockett looked at me and said, why didn't you tell me? I said, well, you never asked. I just didn't know. So then he started working me in, and of course I continued to wrestle. Then I was doing double duty then. I did the TV there. I went down to Atlanta during the war and did co-hosted with Gordon, and then I did produced and hosted Southeastern Wrestling and so on and so forth. But Rudy is the guy that got me my first start with television and in the Maritimes.
I mean, it definitely panned out for you. Your broadcasting career in pro wrestling. I mean, 1995, like commentator of the year for Smoky Mountain, commentator of the year for Southeastern Championship, in 1978. So I mean, it definitely, you definitely, made an excellent go of it.
I was so blessed. During between 1960 and 1980, I was so blessed to have wrestled with some of the greatest talents ever in this business, to learn from them. I was blessed to be around tremendous bookers and manipulators like Eddie Graham and Leo Garibaldi, and businessmen like Jim Crockett Sr., Jim Barnett, and people like that. But in television, I look at that and I think, my God, what a ride, because I worked with Bob Cottle, Lance Russell, Gordon Soley, and Jim Ross, and Charlie Platt down in the Gulf Coast, who I just saw Charlie at the Gulf Coast reunion this past weekend, and I told him, I said, you're one of the best kept secrets in the world. I said, I talk about the commentators I've worked with, and I have to explain who the hell you are. But he was right up there with the other guys too. It's just he never was on a national basis, so he was never seen around the country. But yeah, I was blessed to work with some great guys. Well, Ross, like myself, considered solely a mentor, and so to be able to share microphones with all those great announcers, I just feel I feel blessed. I've had a great career. I mean, I really do. I've enjoyed it tremendously, and hope is the good Lord willing to continue on for a few more years.
Oh, I'm sure it definitely will. Like I said at the top of the show, your wrestling resume is 7 full pages, and your credentials are just beyond impressive. And I mean, I know you're going to have several more years in the industry. And you had mentioned about how guys physiques are they should be a certain level of physical fitness in pro wrestling. I wanted to get your thoughts on an individual whose physique and fitness regimen has kind of been controversial over the last few months, The Rock. And I wrote an article a few months back defending The Rock because you have as well as I do, Les. You have all the armchair bookers and the marks and the pro wrestling pundits who have say that Rock is on something, and I wrote an article defending The Rock that saying that I think in my own opinion he's not. So what do you think about a guy like Dwayne Johnson
okay.
and his
well,
fitness level?
To give you a little background first on what I'm before I give you my opinion here, I have trained bodybuilders, amateurs and professionals. I worked with a company here in Cincinnati called Perillo Performance, and we worked with IFBB pros and NPC amateurs. I did masters amateur bodybuilding from age 47 to age 54.
Right.
I have never used because, well, to me it was a hobby. It wasn't. Now, my stance on steroids, Richard, is this: it's a personal thing. It's illegal. Well, I mean, it hasn't always been, but it currently is illegal. I would never suggest anybody doing it, but I think that it's kind of, an individual's choice. Back in the 80s and even in the early 90s, to say everybody was probably loaded, or not, I shouldn't say everybody, but a huge percentage of guys, yeah, they probably were. You can get in good, I had this conversation on the Observer show a few weeks ago. We were talking, everybody's Ryback and Cena and Big E that's with Ziggler. And I said, here's the thing. Are they on now? I won't say yes or no. It's hard to say. I've seen guys build great physiques naturally. You can, a guy who's say a pro in contest shape with the veins just, just freaky popping out, freaky shapes, muscles. It's almost without saying, yeah, this guy's on. Is Rock on? I would say probably not now. Would I say he was on at some point? I would think, yeah, probably. Okay. But then again, a lot of guys were, because it wasn't illegal. And, it's, but here's the deal too. You can do a few cycles, but part of the thing is about people who understand about drugs. I have seen guys on steroids that look like hell, that because they didn't eat properly, they didn't train properly. There is no magic pill, and steroids you can't jab a needle in your rear end or pop pills and sit down on the couch and eat candy and watch television and end up looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
I mean, you still have to train as hard and eat properly. Otherwise, the steroids aren't of any value. Were the pro bodybuilders that I worked with? Yes, obviously. I mean, you can't. I've only known one guy that tell you that he was natural as a pro, as an IFBB pro, and if you had $10,000 in your hand, he'd let you drug test him. It didn't matter. I mean, he wouldn't need a day to get ready or nothing. You could have him pee in the can at that moment as long as you hand him $10,000. And I would think that he was, but a lot of this has to do with genetics. And that's something I always tell guys. I've had kids come to me that have trained and say, should I get on the Jews? Well, how have you reached your genetic potential? But that's the thing, too. I remember remember working with a pro bodybuilder. I'll tell you a little story. I worked with a pro. I won't mention the name. He's not in the sport any longer. But when I was working for Pro Performance, I worked with a guy who was in competed in Mr. Olympia, won a few pro shows. A real nice guy. But anyway, his story was he had great genetics, and he won his IFBB pro card in an NPC national meet natural, because God had gifted him, with great genetics, and he worked hard, and he ate properly and lifted properly and everything. So he won his pro card natural. He did his first pro show natural. But he also told me, he said, I placed so far out of the money, he probably, it wouldn't even matter. But he said, I looked up and down that lineup when we were on the stage, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to compete at this level, I have to do what everybody else is doing, But, depending on your genetics, you can get in damn good shape. Cena used, gosh, I've been accused of things I've never. So I hate to, to say yes or no.
Right.
It's possible. It's possible that Ryback has, but it's also, I was telling these guys that we're having this discussion. I said, look at the pictures of Bruno when he was young.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendous shape. Bruno was natural. I remember. I was talking. Don Fargo was at the reunion, and we were talking about Eric Pedersen, who had placed second to Steve Reeves in the 1947 Mr. America. And I first met them. They came to Fargo and Pedersen came to Boston as the Mr. Americas for Jack Pfeffer in 1961. This is before Diana Ball, which was, as far as I know, the first, anabolic that was readily available to the general public.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at their physiques. And I don't know, the only thing they were on there was good food, I think, and a lot of hard work in the weight room. So, but I'm going to surmise that probably at some point Rock may have used. Is he using currently? I think probably not,
Mm.
But, again, it's hard to say, because you can use for a while, and if you take care of yourself when you come off, when you cycle off, you can maintain a hell of a good physique. I think, I don't know, on my website, I think there's some, on LesThatcher.com, there's some of my bodybuilding pictures. And the crazy thing is, people, really uninformed, it just, when they see muscles, they think steroids. It's just an automatic, it triggers it. I've had guys in the wrestling business. I'll tell you one, for example, Raven, Scotty used to drive me nuts because he worked for me at OVW for a while, and he'd look at the pictures of me when I was in competitive shape. He'd say, "What were you on?" Scotty, I was, bullshit. But I just use supplements that you can buy at GNC.
Yeah.
Or, any place else, and train hard. Now, I wasn't big and freaky.
No.
Because my mom and dad didn't bless me with those kind of genetics, But that's part of it, too. You can take all the drugs in the world. If you don't have good genetics, you're not going to get, you're not going to gain all the great size and the great shape. And a lot of it has to do with who your mother and father are, for God's sakes.
Absolutely.
But,
yeah.
I wouldn't say that he has never been on, but I would say he's probably not on anything now. But he trains like a wild man. And, he has, realize, forget wrestling, the kind of money he's making in the movie. I mean, he's got 3 movies, 2 out now and one more coming. And so to make the kind of money he makes in movies, he can't afford to look fat or smooth, or soft.
Exactly.
And I don't blame him. That's because I think he picks up around 8 to 10 mil a flick. So for that kind of money, I'll work as hard as you need me to work, Richard. Just make me the offer.
Well, exactly.
But,
I mean,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, that's exactly my point that I said in my article. Rock has, an almost infinite, amount of money that he can look into alternative methods of, getting bigger and not have to reduce himself to getting steroids or getting, and he's over 40, and I'm sure that you're right, he works his ass off to look like that, and he has great genetics. I mean, Samoans are, typically bigger in stature anyway. So